Hi, this is Kristy Greenberg for Talking Feds. I'm the host of Courtside with Kristy Greenberg on YouTube, a former federal prosecutor and former deputy chief of the criminal division for the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. That's where I prosecuted and supervised many sex trafficking cases. And that's the same office that prosecuted Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I've reviewed the transcript of DOJ No. 2 Todd Blanche's interview with Ghislaine Maxwell. The Republican talking point is that Maxwell cleared Trump. No, she didn't. Do not buy what they are selling here. There are 3 problems with the argument that Maxwell cleared Trump. I'm going to walk you through them. Let's start with what Maxwell said. She said she didn't see or hear Trump do anything inappropriate. Specifically, she said, I actually never saw the president in any type of massage setting. I never witnessed the president in any inappropriate setting in any way. The president was never inappropriate with anybody. In the times that I was with him, he was a gentleman in all respects. Yeah, okay. Elsewhere in the transcript, Todd Blanche asked, and did you ever hear Mr. Epstein or anybody say that President Trump had done anything inappropriate with masseuses or with anybody in your world? Maxwell, absolutely never in any context. Okay, for starters, these aren't good questions. Words like inappropriate are too vague. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Maxwell considers inappropriate a different way than maybe you or I do. The better form of the question would be, did you see President Trump engage in any form of sexual activity? Did you hear from Epstein or anyone else about President Trump engaging in any form of sexual activity? If the answers to those questions are yes, then you follow up with questions about who the sexual activity was with and what the circumstances were to determine if it was illegal. But here's the first problem. For Maxwell's statement that she didn't see or hear Trump do anything inappropriate, for that statement to matter, she would first need to establish that she was in a position to see or hear any inappropriate behavior from Epstein and his friends. She'd need to be close to Epstein and spend a lot of time with him and his friends for it to matter that she didn't see or hear anything inappropriate. But Maxwell didn't say that. She said the exact opposite. She very intentionally distanced herself from Epstein. For example, she said she was never with him regularly in the 90s. He had a lot of other women. He literally had a separate life from me. I literally had a separate life from him. He kept a lot to himself, and he didn't like to share. He was not a sharer, at least not with me. To be clear, if you accept Maxwell's story that she wasn't around Epstein much, that they had separate lives and Epstein didn't confide in her, then she can't clear Trump or anyone of anything. Put another way, you have to be an insider, someone with access, someone in the know about Epstein's sex trafficking to then clear any of Epstein's buddies of sex trafficking. And here's the second problem. If you buy that Maxwell's saying, I didn't see or hear of a person doing something inappropriate, if you buy that that is enough to clear Trump of wrongdoing, you also have to buy that Maxwell cleared Epstein and the hundreds of other men she was asked about of wrongdoing too, because Maxwell said the same thing about Trump that she said about every other person she was asked about, including Jeffrey Epstein. She denied seeing or hearing anyone do anything wrong. She saw no evil, she heard no evil, she had no idea that there was anything wrong in the Jeffrey Epstein universe. Here's what she said about Jeffrey Epstein. When her lawyer asked her, did you ever see an underage girl go into a massage room with Mr. Epstein? Maxwell said no. When her lawyer asked her whether she was ever in a massage room with Jeffrey Epstein with a masseuse that was naked or giving him sexual favors, she replied, I never saw that I remember. When her lawyer asked her whether any of the masseuses ever discussed with her that they gave sexual favors to Epstein, she said no. Here's what she said about every other man Blanche asked about. Blanche asked, and this is a convoluted question, for any of the folks that we've talked about today, did you observe them doing anything improper with Mr. Epstein, whether with masseuses or with women who were, or girls who were, traveling or at the residence that they were at or at the parties that they were at. Maxwell said, "I did not ever at any time see that." To be clear, Maxwell's story is that she never saw or heard anyone doing anything improper. Full stop. So if you believe Maxwell, not seeing or hearing anything improper is enough to clear Trump, you'd have to believe it's enough to clear everyone else, including Epstein. Maxwell's word alone can't clear anyone, because it would clear everyone, including Maxwell, who denies any wrongdoing here, even though she was convicted at trial of sex trafficking. And here's the third problem, the biggest problem, the most insurmountable problem. Maxwell's a liar. She has repeatedly lied that she did nothing wrong and is a scapegoat for Epstein's crimes. She repeated that same lie throughout this interview. She called the victims liars. She accused Virginia Roberts of lying in her civil deposition. Maxwell said she never recruited a masseuse from Mar-a-Lago for a private massage for Epstein, contrary to the evidence at trial that she did so with respect to Virginia Roberts. And Maxwell recruited her when she was 17 from the parking lot of Mar-a-Lago to provide Epstein with massages. That was the evidence at trial. When Maxwell was asked if she recalled whether she gave another victim known as Kate an 18th birthday card, she said she didn't, that she didn't meet her until she was 20 or 21. As to another victim known as Jane, Maxwell said she disputed Jane's allegations, at which point Blanche said, "Let's not talk about individuals." He then said, "I don't think it's helpful for us to have you kind of address each allegation." Why not? You're a prosecutor interviewing a defendant who has been accused by several victims of sex trafficking them, and a jury believed the victims and convicted Maxwell. Now, if you're a prosecutor trying to figure out what the truth is and evaluate Maxwell's credibility, why wouldn't you ask about what each of those victims said? Why wouldn't it be helpful for Maxwell to address each victim's allegations against her? The reason Blanche gave during the interview: "I'm not trying to create a she said situation." That makes no sense. It is a she said situation. To be clear, you can't believe the victims and Maxwell. One of them is lying. The victims accused her and she didn't plead guilty. She disputed their accusations and went to trial. Prosecutor can't evaluate Maxwell's credibility without asking her to respond to what the victims said about her. That is the prosecutor's job, to consider both sides and figure out whose account to credit based on all the evidence. The only reason I can think of for Blanche avoiding laying out this she said dispute in this interview is that he had another agenda, an agenda to rely on Maxwell, clearing Trump. And that requires Maxwell being believed by the public. And it's harder to cast Maxwell as a victim who should be believed if she's blaming the victims and calling them liars. To be clear, Maxwell lied throughout this interview, but she never got called on any of her lies because Todd Blanche wasn't acting as a prosecutor. He was acting as Trump's defense attorney. Let me give you another example. Let's go back to Maxwell's statements that I mentioned earlier about distancing herself from Epstein, saying she never was with him regularly in the 90s, that he had lots of other women, he literally had a separate life from me, and I literally had a separate life from him. Let's just go back to that for a second. Those are lies. The evidence at trial established that beginning in roughly 1991, she had a close and intimate relationship with Epstein. She was Epstein's girlfriend for many years, until about the early 2000s, and even after that, they remained close friends. For over a decade, Maxwell traveled the world with Epstein, a multimillionaire. On his private planes, she mingled with the rich and the famous. Maxwell herself wrote in an essay that she and Epstein were a great couple who were rarely apart. They were great partners, and they were the best of friends. Now, a real prosecutor would have stopped Maxwell during the interview and confronted Maxwell with her own words that contradicted what she was saying. But as I said, Blanche wasn't there as a prosecutor. Instead, he accepted Maxwell's lies, that she wasn't that close to Epstein. Here's what he said. This is from Blanche's mouth in the interview. When I think about you and the public's perception of Mr. Epstein, the public is left with the view that nobody in the world knows what really happened except for you, okay? And now that you've explained the last day and a half how some of that's just a misperception because you didn't have a key to his house, you weren't around as much as maybe everybody claims you were, okay? What is going on here? Why would Blanche credit Maxwell over the victims and over the mountain of evidence at trial showing just how close Epstein and Maxwell were? Because he can't reward Maxwell for clearing Trump with a transfer to a country club prison or a commutation of her sentence or a pardon if she's a convicted sex trafficker. But if she wasn't as involved with Maxwell as people think, if she was unaware of his crimes and was innocent herself, then you can. This interview wasn't about exposing Maxwell's lies and finding the truth. It was about pushing the narrative to clear Trump and make Maxwell a victim. Here's why I think so. At the end of the first day's interview, Blanche told Maxwell, "Everything was great today and it was very helpful." How so? What exactly was helpful to Blanche? She just denied any personal knowledge of anything. Blanche also said, "I'm not asking you to corroborate anything." Words said by no prosecutor ever. That's how prosecutors figure out if somebody's telling the truth, by trying to find other evidence that either supports or contradicts their story. If he's not asking for corroborating evidence, it begs the question of why not? At the end of the second day's interview, Blanche reiterated that this has been very helpful. He also said if they have follow-up questions, they'll do it with her lawyers, meaning they aren't going to meet with her again. As a prosecutor, if you're seeking to rely on a witness to build a case or develop investigative leads, you meet with them more than once. Most witnesses minimize their own wrongdoing during the first meeting. It takes several meetings to get to the truth. The fact that this is a one and done means Blanche got what he came for. And since he got nothing other than denials about everyone, including Trump, that must have been what he came for. He said that he'll talk to Maxwell's lawyer about what, if anything, to do next. And then, after that interview, Maxwell was transferred to a country club facility. That is not a facility for sex offenders. That is a reward. Again, she offered no investigative leads. She accepted no responsibility for her actions, and she showed no remorse to the victims. Other than clearing Trump, what else could she be rewarded for? And sadly, I fear this isn't the end. I worry that Trump will commute Maxwell's sentence or pardon her. And if that happens, it will be a betrayal of every one of Maxwell's victims. And even worse, it will send a message to all sex trafficking victims that even if they are strong enough to stand up to their traffickers, the United States government is not strong enough to stand up for them. This is Kristy Greenberg for Talking Feds. You can find more of my videos on my YouTube channel, Courtside with Kristy Greenberg. Thanks for listening and hope to see you courtside.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.